Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Truth Wanted, the call-in show that happens live every single week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central, where we talk about what people believe and why. I am your host, as always, Objectively Dan, and joining me this time is a very different guest from what we usually get. This is the one and only Scott Crow. Scott Crow, welcome to Truth Wanted.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and so the reason why I say you're a different guest is because, oftentimes we talk about religion and we talk about philosophy sometimes, but I got you on for kind of some different reasons, I think. And obviously, we'll probably get into all of those topics, but recently, or earlier this year, rather, we had the George Floyd killing. And there's been just kind of lots of protests happening in the country. And while that was first happening, just to give you guys an idea of how far out we plan some of these guests, I heard you on a different podcast, Scott. And you're a fan of, you're a fan of a lot of different things, but you have a lot of experience with direct action. You have a lot of experience with just fighting the powers that be to kind of make change happen for the good of people. And I get asked a lot on this show about like what kinds of things we can do in sort of an activism sense. And sometimes I have good answers, but sometimes I don't know what to do at all. And so I heard your story and I got in contact with you, and you have a great book. It's called Black Flags and Windmills. And that book in particular focuses a lot about your efforts in organizing collective efforts in after the events of Hurricane Katrina, really during Hurricane Katrina. And since then, you've been involved, and even before that, involved in different collectivist groups and stuff. You've been a speaker and an author, and at one point wanted by the U.S. government, and just like you have a pretty wild story. So like, I want you to go ahead and introduce yourself because you have a lot of tags to your name.
Man, I don't even know what to say anymore about what I do. But political liberation and collective liberation for people and freedom outside of governments has been a theme throughout all of my life. Stopping oppression and reducing suffering outside of institutions like charities and governments and corporations has been something that's just always been there. But it's taken different vehicles. I mean, I've owned art galleries. I currently still sell art, and I've been a musician for a long time, and that was a big form of communication that I had. And then also, I was just a political activist, I guess, for decades. And so I've been doing political work for about 35 years formally. And in that, I worked within systems, worked within the Democratic Party at local levels and medium levels. I worked for the Green Party back in the 90s. And I was just so disillusioned with party politics that I started to discover these ideas called of anarchy a lot more, and they just started to resonate a lot more because I wanted to create power from below for people like you and me and other people around us, not just white people, but people who need the power. I wanted us to work together to create power from below, outside of these institutions, because these institutions always fail us, no matter if they're corporate or governmental. And so that kind of has been led me to a lot of things, and it's like led me to a lot of protest and resisting oppression and trying to create justice, and policing systems and things like that. But after 20 years of doing it, I realized that really the systems need to be dismantled and rebuilt, not at the same time. But so I started working this idea of dual power within an anarchist framework. And anarchy, to me, is just a living, dynamic set of ideas about how we create freedom and autonomy and collective autonomy, not for individuals, but with individuals and within communities and neighborhoods and stuff, so that we can have power for ourselves to take care of things like education and healthcare or self-defense or anything, anything that would be that we would pass off to nonprofits or governments. And so it's been an exploration of that along the ways. And then when Katrina came ashore, in 2005, I had already been decades into political work, and I went down there to ostensibly, literally, to rescue somebody who turns out didn't need to be rescued. A longtime friend of mine who lived there, who had spent decades in solitary confinement in prison, and had been living there, and then had been, we thought, trapped by the storm. So I went to go find him, and within that, I was thinking on the 8 hours driving there the first time. This is 2 days after Katrina. Like, well, what is it we could do? Like, if governments and nonprofits have failed everybody, which we could already see in the early days, even though we didn't know how the extent of it. What could we do as individuals and collectively to rebuild civil society that not only was struck by the disaster of Katrina, but also the long history of disaster of systemic racism and being ignored as poor communities for decades? And so it started with a real simple concept of like some street medics, which are medics that could be doctors, paramedics, people with EMT training, working together. Sorry, my nose is itching. And the that have working together to help people in the streets, usually around protests and stuff. But could they build a first aid station right after this disaster? So I started calling them immediately and going, "Can you come down from all over the country?" There's been these anarchist networks that existed for the last 20 years, and so I called them, and then I started to think, well, could a first aid station become a clinic? Could a clinic become a hospital? And not corporate controlled or government controlled, but individual in those communities. Because some of the communities, like you were talking about earlier, that you were from, you had family in Metairie, but there's like, this is in Algiers neighborhood specifically. They hadn't had a health clinic locally for the people there for 16 or 18 years. So Katrina just like knocked the rest of that off. And really what happened was I saw the failure of governments. I mean, it's not the first time I'd seen it, but it was like on a scale I had never seen before, where basically I realized that bureaucracies of that scale just cannot care. And so I was like, let's do this ourselves, not for ourselves, but with the communities there. And let's start fucking building it from the ground up. Everything, healthcare, education, self-defense, like food security, everything, whatever it meant, individually and collectively for people. I'm not a communist. I just want people to be free and to be able to have the ideas and to express themselves and have their desires met without having government interference or corporate influence or a corporate undue influence on that. And so it's that's kind of where it comes from.
Yeah, and earlier this year, I myself participated in the Black Lives Matters protest here in Austin. That was my first time participating in any protest ever. I've grown up most of my life in Waco, where that's just not really a thing that happens there. And it was exhilarating and scary and just a lot of different things. It was exhilarating to see so many people out on the street, just self-motivated to come out here. Nobody's being paid to come out here, despite all what those crazy conspiracy theories might say. These are people who were individually motivated to take action themselves. And on top of that, I saw people passing out water bottles, not charging people for it, just giving people water. People offering medical aid if they needed it. People who were willing to give people a leg up, to hold them up to see over the crowds and stuff like that. I had never really experienced anything like that before, and it was inspiring, but it was also like I couldn't help but think, okay, yeah, we're all out here today, but what about tomorrow? And what about the day after that? And people do talk about this idea of what do protests even do in that sense. And I guess I want to get your take on that first, because, people ask me again, like, what can we do to like make the changes in the systems we want? And sometimes I really don't know how to answer that.
Well, I think there's multiple things to do. I don't think there's one correct answer, and I don't have the answer. So I want to be clear about that. I don't have the answer. But what you experienced, where you saw street medics, when you saw people doing that was street medics. Those are anarchists. So you're seeing the rise of anarchist ideas across leftist movements, and actually through right-wing movements too. I think left and right are false dichotomies, but let's just use those as examples.
Sure.
And so you have seen the ideas of anarchy and self-organization really, really take a effect. And so what you're seeing when you're seeing the Black Lives Matter, you're seeing people rising up against the systemic racism and injustices, and they're demanding more than just police accountability, which never has worked. I mean, I've been to those protests for decades, and it'd be like 10 of us or 5 of us, the family, and there would be nobody else. This has been beautiful to see the uprisings of happening. But it is just the first step, because people have to release their anger. They have to say, ya basta, enough. We're not taking this shit anymore. And so that's the first step, but it doesn't build liberation. It just stops the oppression and the suffering that happens at the moment. And so what we took was those ideas of like street medics, like you just talked about. Yeah. And then, but when a disaster happened, we began to ask, well, could street medics build this thing? You know, it's just people like you and me who are like offering, you know, aid. And then could they build this? Not for just themselves or for white people, but for everybody, or for their community, that whatever that means, like the people around them. And so this is where these liberatory ideas come from. And we're in a historic time, as far as as far as I know, and I'm a pretty good historian about political movements in the United States. We saw the rise of anarchy more so after 1999 in the United States than we'd ever seen since the early 20th century. But that was only one piece of it. We've also seen the rise of fascism more than we've ever seen before. And so we have these two historic things that are happening right now. Fascism showing itself like it has not in 100 years, probably in the United States, but also people rising up in this amazing movements totally inspired by anarchist ideas: decentralization, direct action, solidarity across movements. I mean, there's a bunch of, I'm using buzzwords, but I'm just saying that there's a bunch of these foundational ideas that are just happening. And the people I've talked to who were in the civil rights movement forever, you know, from the 50s and the 60s, who are old now, they were saying that the civil rights was never like this. They were saying it was never as big as this, never. And its whole existence was never as big as this.
Wow.
And I think that what you see now is the uprising of people that don't just want government accountability. They want transformation of the systems that create it altogether. Anarchy.
Yeah, I mean, like, so where I grew up, right? Again, Waco, Texas, right?
Are you a Seventh-day Adventist?
No. I grew up kind of half Methodist, half Baptist.
Oh yeah, Baptist, of course, Waco.
Yeah,
course,
right.
Sure.
Yeah, it's the whole thing. So
you
like,
had to pretend at least.
Yeah, when people talked about like anarchists, you know, it was the typical kind of guy with a black mask and throwing a bomb or something. You know, it's just I mean, I didn't have like the intellectual access to know about the history of like anarchist movements or something, you know, like that wasn't as available to me because it wasn't being taught to me. I didn't figure out any of this kind of stuff before, you know, I saw it on the internet and then decided to like read about it more. And so like, what you know, you already talked about kind of what anarchy means to you, but
now there's so much more.
Yeah, there's so much more to it, and like that,
so
if we could dedicate an entire episode of this show just talking definitions and what people mean by. But I'm just curious as to like, you know, what you do. There's people who choose to do, and I like you use the term liberation a lot, which I think is great. But broadly, I think people use the term activism. But you know, other people may describe it as that. When you do liberation or activism, like you chose to do it through this anarchist frame rather, whereas other people choose to do it through institutions or choose to do it through other ways. What do you think makes this anarchist framework, first of all, most compatible with your personal beliefs, but also like, what do you think makes it so effective? Because it sounds like you think that other kind of institutional solutions kind of fail at the end of the day.
Well, they generally do. So, I mean, let's just be honest about the nonprofit industrial complex. It's a system to raise money. Look who gives the most money. Zuckerberg, you know, Soros. I'm not even trying to get leftist people, but the Koch brothers, like these are the people who fund foundations. But whether it's arts or politics or community programs and stuff, the nonprofit industrial complex, which is like the fundraising mechanisms that we know, are just band-aids for not addressing long-term economic inequalities that can't be addressed through governments only, and also just systemic racism, which this country was built on. First, we killed the indigenous people and took all their land. Sure as conquering, if you want to call it that. I don't know. It's kind of shitty. And then then you're talking about having Africans build this country from the ground up, literally, and then stealing any wealth that they build along the way after we had treated them to worse than indentured servitude. And so anarchy proposes a set of ideas that is beyond just voting your way out of it, which doesn't ever happen, or buying our way out of it, which is a very late 20th century, very 21st century thing. Like, I can give money to this and everything is going to be okay. Well, that's not necessarily true. Or activism, which is like kind of in the middle of that, which is like, we rise up and we do all this shit. And so what anarchy proposes is all these pathways in between that we hadn't even thought about, that aren't even carved out yet, that say, well, protest is protest is a good first step, but then what is it we want to have? And so for me, having worked within the systems and without the systems, and just for background, look, I've been tear gassed. I've had concussion grenades shot at me. I've been on death watch lists from right-wing people, including contemporary right now. I've been the subject of conspiracy theories. I've fucking given up a lot, and I know a lot about this stuff to get to where we are. And what I realize is that people need to build liberation and on their own terms. And it doesn't always look the same for everybody. It's not like a franchise. It's not like a fucking subdivision. It looks different everywhere. And so, but if it's built on similar ideas, then at least we have this opening to try ideas that we might not have because we're afraid of losing funding because we're a nonprofit, or because we can't get elected because we're an elected official or something, and we don't want to say something too controversial. So there's a bunch of things that are like that. And anarchy just proposes to ask different questions and engage them with curiosity, but also direct action, which is not waiting on other people to tell us what to do or giving us permission to what to do. If you see a fucking problem, you take care of it. That's what the deal is, not just individually. And I'm not talking about arms or any of that stuff. It's just like whatever it looks like, you and the people around you taking care of it. And one of the big ways that we do that is through mutual aid. Mutual aid is a fancy word for cooperation. Common Ground Collective and Katrina was built on the ideas of liberatory mutual aid, which is at its basic root, we would take care of each other and cooperate together across people who were not anarchist or political or any of that shit, but just were real people. We made sense to them, and then they would build their futures the way they saw fit, given everything that's in the field, And I'm not here to convince anybody or to promote this. I'm just talking about it because it's the way my brainstem's gotten around in this time.
And that's why I invited you here, because I wanted you to talk about this, because this is a very fascinating thing, and I think people could learn from what you have to say. And I would just want to remind folks, this is a call-in show, so we have some open lines here still. So if you guys want to talk to Scott, Scott's willing to be asked some questions about some of his beliefs and what he's been up to. Now, I want to go back for just a second, because you talked about conspiracy theories. And you said you had some conspiracy theories about yourself, and I kind of wanted to see what's that about? What's going on there?
Well, I think that we live in a post-truth society in many ways. It's not because there aren't multiple truths, because that is true. But there's a consensus of truth that can come out of that, and politics has always generated conspiracies around people. There's other things too, right? Because really, it's a complex world, right? We all know that. We don't understand it all. It's just my individual brainstem, your individual brainstem, trying to sort it out. Literally, I mean, like scientifically, I'm like trying to create reality at the moment that we're talking. Like I'm going on past memories and I'm fucking creating it right this second. Truly, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So what conspiracies do is they bludgeon the truth. They bludgeon things that are just so easily Occam's razor. If you want to talk about that, like the simplest answer is usually the correct answer,
right?
Because they make it more. It creates apophenia, which is this idea that you connect disconnected things, and it's how belief systems are built and ideologies are built. Is because we have to. We are biologically, our imperative is to fucking connect all this stuff so we can stay alive, so I don't get murdered and my children don't get murdered or whatever it is, And so conspiracy theories have flourished under the internet. and largely due to the platforms, the big three platforms, Twitter, Facebook, all of those guys.
Right.
That's the YouTube. YouTube is the worst. At
Yeah,
it,
absolutely.
Truly, the algorithms love it. They love and because the platforms, thrive on eyeballs. It's all about outrage. And then, the other piece that's happened with conspiracy theories is that they have gotten a mouthpiece within electoral politics that they never had before. There's always been elected officials who have believed in conspiracy theories, but they were always the minority now. And now you have somebody who ostensibly, although I see them in a diaper with a bottle in their mouth, I can't see them as very powerful, but that person is the most powerful person on the planet, ostensibly, whatever, if they're a figurehead. Not powerful to me.
I have no idea who could you possibly be talking about, right?
The tiny-handed orange one.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
So he amplifies it, and so conspiracy theories, due to platforms and because of that shit fucker, excuse my language, he basically has amplified conspiracy theories that are dangerous to democracy far along. And the reason I care about them interpersonally is because as a subject of them, I have schizophrenic people that have emailed me for decades because I was under surveillance as a domestic terrorist in the United States, even though nothing had ever happened to me. It never was proved. It never, I was under investigation for 10 years by the FBI and multiple state agencies, and I still suffer from it. But they think I'm the poster child for their schizophrenic fantasy or idea of what's happening. And so it's not, and I have to say it's not real, but what happens is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
When I read the emails, when I get the calls, it's heartbreaking. And I used to get hundreds and hundreds of them. So that's one kind of conspiracy. This is just interpersonally. I'm not saying that I'm special or any of this stuff. I just want to contextualize. I can tell you my story because that's a story.
Yeah, I want to add too, because there's a skeptic YouTuber named Holy Kool-Aid, and I collaborated with him a year or two ago on a flat Earth video. And we started getting comments saying that me and him and other people that were on that video were all paid off by NASA. Like that was the comment section of people saying like we were all, shills or something. And I never
it's totally true.
It's so weird. Like, I've seen that for other YouTubers and other people, but it's weird when it's about you. And it's like, I know firsthand that's not true.
Sure, exactly.
Yeah.
You're like, no, that's not what happened at all.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
it's totally true. It's totally true. But the other conspiracy, which is the dark side, really much more dark side, is that that first conspiracy I was telling you about, those people, the echo chamber says, do not accept help. That psychologists and therapists who might help you. And so family members call, and it's terrible. So that's just the ones the flip side is what you have is like the QAnons and all this. And that is trying to connect people who are not connected. And those lead to people being murdered like me. And I'm not being hyperbolic. I don't think I'm self-important, but I get in those conspiracy theories and they're like, hey, you're related to this thing. You're related to that thing. I should murder you to take you out of this, or friends of mine. And I'm like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Like, that's not even true. But the thing is, in post-truth, I can't fucking tell you that. Right. I have no choice. I cannot convince you in any way. And so I can't. So I just have to avoid it. And that has led to and with the amplification of shitfucker, has just led to so much strife and conspiracy theories, which have always been around. I've been around them all my life. I don't even mean like UFO and Bigfoot and stuff like that. I'm talking about like just political ones. Right. I just cannot believe that they have mainstreamed so much.
I can't believe it either. I've been doing a lot of research on QAnon, and I've been talking about it quite a bit lately, just because I'm so worried about that being probably at least the most dangerous conspiracy theory of my lifetime.
It is
because it's
a
already
threat to democracy.
Yeah, the action's already there. There's people that have already, like the guy that held up the Hoover Dam, the guy that took his family hostage, the pizza guy. Yeah, it's like this. There's more action. Like, you don't see this kind of stuff with other kinds of, like, if you think JFK was murdered by whoever, that's not something that inspires action too much. You'll have maybe a conference about it, but like that's the extent of it. Whereas with the QAnon stuff, it's like, no, people are organizing over this stuff, and they have already committed acts of violence, or at least are making plans to do even more. And on top of that, we have political candidates in this country who also are endorsing the theories, which is very, very scary. I've never seen anything like that. I know of conspiracies have always been around politics.
It's happened. It's always happened. There's always been. Listen, I'm gonna say this. It's always right wingers. There is no left wing conspiracy. If you ask any person who leans left and that has been elected official for the last 50 years, none of them believe in conspiracy theories. It's always right leaning people, and I think that there's some biological imperative in that. There's like some hardwiring in it. I mean, that's true. I don't know what it is because I'm not a fucking brain scientist. But it's also the media ecosystems that they are a part of. And I think that's a very big problem because the media ecosystems for right-wing people operate like cults. So if you lived in Waco, I don't know if you're familiar with the Branch Davidians or the Seventh-day Adventists of any.
I'm pretty aware. Yeah.
So you know how they operate, which is like they generate their own media. I'm not saying like it was like an empire or something, but everybody, the stories that are told
of information, the circulation of information,
and don't look to the outside because it's untrustworthy.
It's a closed system.
And so the right-wing media ecosystem has risen in the last 10 years is totally like that. It says do not trust mainstream media, which is the media that all the rest of us get.
Now I'll tell you
the regular media.
I'll tell you this though, because when it comes to QAnon, I might I don't know. This isn't necessarily a criticism.
It's a new religion.
But what I've seen with this is there's a pipeline from the kind of more spiritual types, you know, the Instagram influencers and stuff that are more free spirit, is not spiritual, but free spirit types. I'm seeing a lot of that, and there's a lot of evidence that those kinds of people are also getting into the QAnon stuff. Which these aren't people who are voting right necessarily, but they are people who may be exposed to kind of other ideas that it's crystal healing and stuff like that. You know, I'm seeing a lot of that pull from these kinds of other sort of fringe communities into QAnon.
Yeah, but they've always been there. But I can tell you, without the right-wing media ecosystem, it would not exist. They would still be there. Your crystal healing buddy would still maybe believe some weird conspiracy, but they'd be in the woods and you wouldn't fucking know it. Or they're in New Mexico, you know, and you wouldn't even know it. But what's happening is all of it's being amplified now. And so there's people who are questioning, which is good, but then when they come to YouTube, the fucking thing leads them down this rabbit hole that just like it goes to more extremism of shit that should never be. It took me 5 years to get YouTube to take down a video of me on a conspiracy. I had to say, hey, look, stop this. Stop it. It causes damage to me. 5 fucking years, YouTube.
YouTube is the worst when it comes to that. Absolutely.
But all of those people, what do they have in common is an untrust of the government. And then the only thing that in these worlds, I'm not talking about Bigfoot and UFOs and stuff. I mean, we can talk about healing crystals and shit. That's all separate. But just in the political world of QAnon and stuff, is that it's people who are questioning government, but not getting access to information. I question government, but I use a critical analysis in it.
Yeah, that was my next
Christian
question.
Government.
That was my next question, because in anarchist circles, do you find that there's any conspiracy stuff that goes around?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, yeah. There's whole belief systems within activist subcultures. There's beliefs. Listen, we're all brains trying to figure things out.
Absolutely.
And so every subculture has its own self mirror of reflection. This is totally, like this is not. I didn't make this up. Sociologists have done it. So yes, activism has it. Anarchy and anarchism within that spectrum has its own things. I don't agree with them. I don't believe it. So for me, it's a breakdown of all ideologies, not a rejection of ideologies, a critical analysis of all ideologies, whether they're fucking religious or secular. Because if you're going to question the government and you're going to think that it's way easier for 15 people to control the world than some crazy complex thing, that's not critical analysis. That's just fucking laziness, like our being spoon-fed stuff.
Oh, yeah. The way I see it is... I think it comes down also to a lack of civics education, in the sense that people don't understand the complex systems that not only help figure out how the state runs, but also how the problems happen on a systemic level. Because when you realize
that's totally true.
Yeah. when you talk about inequality, for example, and you talk about what leads to inequality, well, we can look at racial disparity in this country. We can look at the minimum wage not changing for however long it's been now. We can talk, there's tons of ideas that may or may not contribute in a wide variety of ways. Or you could just say, it's the people. It's Jeff Bezos wants to bring us all down. Not that I'm saying
lizard shape-shifting people.
Yeah, lizard shapeshifters or bankers.
The bankers.
Yeah, and the problem is there is like evil rich people. I'm not gonna say there's not, but it's not the way that people think it is.
There's class war. Class war.
I don't know. It's systemic. And if you don't talk about the nuances there, that might be lost on people. And the easier explanation might be able to say, well, it's just Bill Gates wants to get us all with the vaccines so he can control us or something.
And I'll tell you, I wish it was that easy. Dude,
Yeah.
it would be so easy because you know why? We'd go to their house with
we go to their house.
That's exactly what we would
right.
do.
Yeah.
Listen, I like with crazy complex system, we have totally gone to their houses with torches.
Yeah.
Recognizing that shit's complex and like, hey man, you can't build Frankensteins that are gonna kill us all, or whatever it is.
Totally true. Yeah, absolutely.
And so but what happens is that you get these, like in any zealotry, which is now happening. I mean, QAnon in particular, I don't know, we don't have to keep going on about it, is it's problematic because people will be murdered from it. You can predict, I'm predicting it right now. Wait, they've already been murdered from it? Oh, yeah, that's true. And they're going to continue to be murdered from it.
Yeah.
And you have a shit fucking president of the United States, which, dude, I never come on and talk about the president ever because he is irrelevant in my life and I hate them all. So just so you know, it's like I'm not loving this president and hating this one. I hate them all, but this one's especially particular. Like the U.S. and the world the fallout is going to take decades to get out of this. Of all the things that have happened.
Yeah.
And conspiracies roll all through all of this, and I don't want any of the warriors for that to keep murdering people on the street. Like in our own town in Austin here, they murdered somebody 3 weeks ago. In Kenosha, Wisconsin, they murdered somebody. There's been 20 driving incidents. That is all fear-based from this right-wing media ecosystem and some conspiracies around QAnon specifically, which is headed towards being a new religion, and I fucking hate it.
It already is, honestly.
It is actually.
People who have studied cults have really made that commentary already. But I think the internet is just the most beautiful mistake humanity has ever made, right? Because it allows us to do something like this right here, where we can talk and we can meet others and join in communities. But it also creates these echo chambers and media ecosystems that just
can be manipulated. It's not just random, but just be clear about it. Like the platforms, they're corporate driven, so they want money, right? That's fine.
Yeah.
Like
Excellent point.
That's their agenda. But they also have no transparency about the way they are, and they encourage outrage because it keeps people on it.
You're right.
YouTube, I keep saying it is particular, but Facebook also. People. Like they took down just last week a bunch of anti-fascist people who want to fight against racism. They took about a bunch of websites and news sites and stuff, hundreds of them, but also thousands of QAnon sites because they see them as the same, and that's problematic because there's no way to deal with that. And so you just lump everything together, and that's not democracy in the way the United States knows it, and that is not liberation the way I know it.
Yeah. And everyone always asks again, like, what can we do about that with the QAnon stuff? Man, that's tough. I don't know if anybody has great answers, but we try to have conversations, and that's what we're going to do today in just a second. But before we get to calls, I want to thank our lovely patrons that help make this show happen every week. Thank you guys so much. You guys help pay for the equipment that makes this show, and you help make sure that we do a show every single week. And I want to give a special thanks to the patron of the week, which is Marcy Mariano. So thank you, Marcy, for donating to the show. And if you would like to become a patron of the week, please consider donating. It's patreon.com/truthwanted. Love you guys. You are awesome. Scott, are you ready to talk to some people on the phone?
Sure. Let's do it.
All right, cool. So this is This is an interesting call here. We're going to talk to Sally in Australia. Sally, what's going on?
Hi, I'm calling because I want to rant about charities, especially from the church.
Yeah, charities from the church. So Scott has a great, you have a great, you're not a sloganeer, but like you have a great
I didn't make that up.
You didn't make this one up, but I first encountered this in your book.
Slogan.
Yeah, I first encountered this in your book.
Somebody brought this to, I'll say it. It's
go ahead.
So somebody brought this to New Orleans because there's a whole body of work around it. And then I just developed the theories in an anarchist perspective, but it's solidarity, not charity. Mm-hmm. Charity is saying that you have power over somebody and that you're just willing to help out and stop capitalism. And, like, hey, they're suffering, I'm going to help them. That's fine. That's great. That's the minimum. We need that, right? Because we want to alleviate suffering. But solidarity says, well, man, my life, my struggle is wrapped up in yours. And that if you do better, I do better also. And I'm willing to help you and your community to do better so we can all do better. And that's solidarity. And that can take all kinds of forms.
Yeah, for sure. But Sally, what did you want to talk about specifically in terms of charities?
Well, I think it's just an open conspiracy, especially with the Catholic Church. I mean, they're the morality police. If you don't qualify morally, you get nothing. And it's a way to keep people in under their control. And I find it a disgusting notion. I think assistance should come from governments who are non-political, non-partial, and non-judgmental. Even a soup kitchen, you have to listen to a sermon before you get food. I mean, this is outrageous, and I can't believe it's accepted in polite society. I really don't.
You know what I say about those kind of church charities? Fuck them. I'm trying to be nice about it. Yeah. But I appreciate that they are doing the minimum that they can do. But you know what? Get in fucking line. There's a fucking 10,000 other people doing the same thing without fucking preaching the sermon. You know what I mean? And I'm not even atheism is not my thing. Like, I'm just saying, like, look, nobody should be held up for anything. And listen, there like religion, like anything, Catholicism, like anything, there's spectrums in it, right? And there's very small spectrums that are liberatory. In fact, the idea of liberatory came out of work, like not my work, because I was never a fucking Catholic, but with people who were liberatory Catholics. I can't remember what they call themselves. It's liberation theology. Mm-hmm. And so they were working with people in Central and South America through the 80s and the 90s, which I also worked with at different very times and so that liberatory idea is some of the way I came into it, because they work in solidarity, not charity, but they're the fucking minority. I'm sorry, I keep cussing so much. Sorry. Yeah. They are the minority of the larger spectrum of Catholicism, which is largely whatever.
Yeah, no. It's
I don't have to say it.
One of the most uncomfortable times I remember in recent memory was when I was a Christian. I my girlfriend at the time did this homeless ministry that she volunteered at every weekend, and I was proud of her for taking her time out of her day to go and help other people, which is good. But I didn't actually go with her for that.
I don't want to diminish that, because it is important.
Well, no.
Important.
Let me tell you what. Yeah. No. This is. I'm on your side here, because I never went to it for most of the time, and one of the times I did go, I didn't realize they did this, right? But they gave a sermon before they gave food to people, and I'd always heard about that in my mind and stuff, and I guess I'd seen it before, but I just remember in that moment, just sitting in that room, just seeing a room full of hungry people who just don't care about what the person up there is saying. Like, they just want to eat. And it was almost dehumanizing in a way. It really was. I couldn't. Sure. I did not feel comfortable in that space at all. Yeah.
Can I show you a difference between the two, between charity and solidarity?
Yeah.
Charity is like the feeding of people to meet their basic needs and making them fucking listen to your ideology first. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? Religions aren't the only ones that do that. Fucking communists do it. Party people fucking do it. Corporations do it. Fuck all of them.
The ACA, that's what we're doing too. That's what we tell people.
But you're not, though, because you know what? I think if you were going to feed somebody, you would go out and you were feed them because it mattered, not because it was promoting your call-in show or because it was promoting your fucking viewpoint. That's the way I see anarchy. Listen, I'm not when I engage in these things, and when I have engaged in these things, it's not to fucking prove anything or to make somebody come around to some idea. It's because I want the best for them as long as they're going to minimize harm to themselves and try to engage in it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think the governments, I want to say that this is what I was going to say. I'm sorry about the Australia person, because I appreciate you calling, and I know it's far away for you. It's late. So you had mentioned, this is what I wanted to say earlier, is that governments are more benign or neutral. That depends on the country you're in. And bureaucracy runs through every corporation and every government and makes them ineffectual and inhumane at all levels, always. And that's not even my fucking opinion about it. It's the truth about it. And so there is no benignness to it, because in the programs they choose to focus on, the things that they do, there's a whole list that they get through that most of us would fall out of and never be able to get through that list to get to those charity things that government might have. That said, I want governments to fall, but not like it's falling now, and I don't know what that looks like. So I'm just being honest, okay?
There you go. Sally, did you have any more to say to that?
Not particularly. Okay. I think Scott covered it all. But yeah, it's just, I find that charities have an agenda. I find the whole notion disgusting that, you know, people have to beg to organisations to get help that should be granted. And while governments aren't perfect either, I think we've got a better chance.
We're in two different countries. We're in two far different countries.
The thing is, though, we can vote in governments. We can't vote in churches. We can't vote them out. And if they're holding all the purse strings, what hope have you got unless you're, approved by these holier-than-thou assholes? And I cannot abide it. I just find it intolerable that these charities exist. In Australia, we had one organisation donate $1 million to fight the same-sex marriage plebiscite. This is outrageous behaviour. Absolutely outrageous.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, we shouldn't rely purely on charities to do the quote-unquote dirty work of picking up what, you know, helping out our fellow man. I've always kind of been disagreed with that, but Scott disagreed with you like right out the bat about something. I want to see what your take was there.
We cannot vote our way out of this. I don't care what country you're in. We're never going to vote our way out. You're never going to vote. We're never going to vote our way to liberation. I'm not even trying to debate anybody about it.
Yeah,
it's just never happened.
Why do you say that?
The Civil Rights Act, like, for example, is not liberation. It just said you can own some property and you can vote within a white system largely, but it didn't create liberation for black people. So now here we are 50 years later, and people are like, man, we're sick of this shit. The police are still killing us. Our children are still going to prisons, and we still have no economic recovery. Our communities dropped crack into our communities in the 90s and, in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. There's a myriad of things that have still happened that are not even close to freedom. And so,
I agree with you, but at least
you cannot vote your way out of it. And again, I'm not debating you about it, because voting is like recycling. It's the minimum you can do. If you're not going to fucking do anything else because you're so lazy to do anything else, or you believe that that's the thing that's going to make change, you should do it. And I don't mean that dismissively. I totally mean that. People hate me in Anarchy because I say that. They're like, that's so US of you. But I'm like, I live in a country of 300 million people. Everybody's not going to get on board with Anarchy, and I'm okay with that. But so some people are going to have to vote their shit out.
Yeah, Sally, I want to give you one more chance to say something here, and then we'll go ahead and go to the next caller.
And I'm not arguing with you, Sally, because you're awesome.
Yes. Well, thank you. No, it's been a great pleasure.
Thank you.
Right. Well, Sally, thanks for calling in. Really appreciate it. Yeah, we're here to listen to you, Scott. I'm curious because, this stuff is fairly new to me in the grand scheme of things. As far as
who is it not new to? Let's be honest.
About
this shit.
Nobody. Yeah, I mean, because it's always been even when I grew up in a conservative worldview, it was still this kind of left-right dichotomy. And here the anarchists are kind of saying, no, it's not even about that. Like, check out all this other stuff that's kind of out there. And it's fascinating to dissect again, because with someone like yourself, how do you come across like the knowledge for the kind of histories of like anarchist movements and stuff? Like where does that come from? Because obviously it's not being taught in schools. It's not being taught in sort of mainstream institutions. Is it all just kind of from books? Is it just from conversations? Where does this community lie?
Well, I think it's approaching everything with curiosity first and foremost. That's the thing, is like, I have to be curious about it. Not because because I like to solve problems. Even if I don't have the answer, I like to think in complexity about how things overlap and how they engage. Even if I'm wrong about it, where I change it over the years, I still want to engage in it. So that's the premise of where I come from. The other thing is, and I've said it many times, and I'm sorry it's a fucking religious phrase, but I want to alleviate suffering. I do want to alleviate suffering for for non-human animals and humans and the environment while I'm on this fucking planet. And I'm really, and so that's the approach to it. And even within anarchy, I'm an outlier generally. I'm a well-respected outlier within anarchist ideas, but I am an outlier in general ideas, because there's a lot of ideology in anarchism too, and I just don't subscribe to it anymore. I've been after being in those subcultures for a long time.
Yeah, and I can say too.
Well, I want to say too that in personally, like, stuff that has affected me, like, I mean, prisons and drugs have run throughout my whole fucking life. Like all my early life was shaped by that stuff. My family members going to prison, drugs, and either people dying from drug overdoses or going to prison from drugs and stuff. And so those things shape me for injustices. Looking at TV and reruns and like Leave It to Beaver was like, who the fuck are these people? I have no idea who these people are. There's nothing in my experience that told me that.
Yeah.
And growing up working class poor, like I had to work to do everything, because even though I've had some privilege of being a white-skinned person, economically, I still had to fucking work on it myself. I'm not saying like bootstraps or any of that shit. There was tons of support along the way when people could, but these are all things that shape how I got here. Everything in our history brings us to this moment. Personally, politically, geographically, everything that we don't even think about brings us to this moment.
Yeah.
And so every moment's a new moment. And so I just learned to look at them as explorations.
Yeah. I think that's good for anybody. Like the joke amongst the atheist community is it's like herding a group of cats. We can't. Half of us can't even agree on what atheism even is. And we all have different. Yeah. We and all of us. I mean, you've got atheists amongst the entire political spectrum. We're kind of characterized as being more left wing, but I've talked to enough people now to know that's not the case for everybody. So yeah, it is. And I'm comfortable where I'm at with the labels that I have, but like I'm still changing stuff. Like I recently took up veganism. Now I'm trying that out, and like that's a new experience for me. And I hope that like 5 years from now, I'm gonna have some new labels for myself that I didn't have before, because I'm figuring out life as I'm going along. So, but really, we all are. I mean, that's the truth. Like, I was vegan and vegetarian. I was one of the people who created the whole animal liberation movement, and around the world. I'm not going to lie. Like, I'm not saying I'm a major player, but I was one of the people who did it. I was vegan and vegetarian for 30 years until more recently. So, and I had to face police for this. I had to face being a terrorist for this, for you to be able to come in and go like, I want to be a vegan. That was a fucking unheard of idea when I started it. So what I've learned is that I like to shift culture far more than I like to, and I want us, it's more important to shift culture than it is to try to legislate something or to get a corporation to only do the right thing, because culture shift is the basis. If people like myself had never done this work, you never would have become a vegan. It's fine. I'm not even trying to claim. I'm not even trying to take credit for it. But there's also unintended outcomes, consequences, and impacts of that. Because veganism, like the reason I'm not vegan or vegetarian anymore, is because. Not because I think that animals don't suffer. I still believe that non-human animals suffer and that we need to eliminate factory farming and all of that stuff. That's still very, very, very important. But the main reason is because
it became another subculture within capitalism. It became another economic structure of a lifestyle for people to do within capitalism. And I disagree with that. And it's also, and veganism is full of racism and misogyny and homophobia and all of that stuff. And it always has been. And to create collective liberation needs to be wider than that.
Wow. Okay. I would definitely want to. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that, but like I have other callers that want to talk to you as well. So let's go ahead and go to.
I knew we should talk longer.
I know, man. Like, listen, Scott, you're in Austin. Like, we gotta chat some more sometime. I'm serious. You're a fascinating guy. But let's go ahead and go to another caller here. We got another call from Australia. Actually, this is Jamie calling in from Australia. Wow. What's going on, Jamie?
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Well, Saturday morning here, and it's a nice day, and it's good to wake up to you guys. So it's appreciate it.
Cool. Yeah. So I saw from the call screener you want to talk about the link between conspiracy theories and theism. So I kind of want to know what your take is there.
Well, my take is, if you look at a lot of the people that make these conspiracy theory claims, a lot of them are highly intelligent people who just seem to have somewhat of a failed epistemology. And they're also they can be quite egotistical in that, they have to be right. They have to be right about everything. So, they sort of filled with this self-importance, and they have secret knowledge that you can't possibly have. And when you look at, the folks that are making these claims, they quite often will, just sort of shake their heads and go, "Oh, you couldn't possibly know. I've got sources that you don't have," and it's sort of smacks of, I'm a true Christian and you couldn't possibly understand because you've never committed to it, etc.
Yeah, it's this like a conspiracy elitism almost, because it's like, yeah, man, I've been watching Alex Jones since day one. All right, you have no idea the stuff I've seen.
Did you say Alex Jones?
Yeah, it's, like that. I've seen that too. I know what you're talking about, Jamie, because it's like, one, not only have I read the stuff that other people talk about and they're full of shit, but also it's like like this. It's like if only people thought the way I thought, then they would agree with me. If only they've seen the things that I've seen, then they would agree with me. And I think that's a mindset people have when they jump into this stuff, because if they look at some of the sources for this without kind of the critical thinking necessary to really think about, okay, what are these people actually saying? Where are they getting their information from? I think that's what kind of tricks people. Because I've encountered that online too, Jamie. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, look, it is, and I've got very personal experience with this. My brother, I'm one of 4 boys, and I'm the youngest. The second eldest basically disappeared out of my life 14 years ago. He was a super intelligent guy, absolutely aced, high school and university, and I kind of looked up to him as a father figure because I basically had an absent father growing up. And then in 2006, I'm now 57, by the way, and in 2006, he just started making these, just things where I sort of went, what? I'm listening to him going, yeah, that doesn't pan out. And it just got worse and worse and worse over time. Fast forward 14 years, he's completely disjointed from the family. And along the way, some of my nephews, etc., cousins were saying, oh, it's okay, just let him go. He's not hurting anyone. And I said, if he continues going down this path, he's going to alienate all his children, his grandchildren, his brothers, his entire family, and that's exactly what happened.
If I could interject about this, it's a heartbreaking story, but it's so common though, right? And I think that you're drawing some really good links between. It's very similar because belief systems are created. The religion. I mean, I'm not even trying to debate religion. I want to be clear about that. And I know we're not on this show, but I just want to say this. Religion was created to create some kind of early order for humankind, where we could figure out what we're going to do. It was a way to systematize the world. Like, don't fuck your kids, don't murder people just because you can. Like stuff like that. Whatever the fucking things are, right? And so belief systems are powerful because whether they're secular, conspiracy theories, or religion, they all cross over with the same thing. And I agree that there's some people who think that they know, but that's usually zealots of any kind, whether they're some kind of terrorist of some kind, with white supremacist terrorists in the United States or anybody. They always believe that they're right because that's a zealousy that happens with this, but they're really just trying to sort things out. Like most people who believe in conspiracies, even if they argue with them vociferously with you online, are trying to do that to and you may already know this already, so forgive me, is that they're just trying to reaffirm what they believe and trying to sort out the world. And no amount of arguing or debating or facts or even empathy will necessarily get rid of that immediately. And that's the problem with belief systems. And this doesn't just happen in fucking outliers. This is true in anything. This is true in activism. This is true in anarchism. This is true in communism. There's, electoral systems. Whatever we're in, whatever subculture we're in, we believe it. We believe everything that comes into that, or a lot of that comes into that. And so I am trying to have unless people are trying to harm me or those around me with words and with actions, I try to come at it with an understanding, even if I'm not going to try to convince them or anything. And I also don't fucking debate anybody online ever, because it's a fucking waste of time, unless you just want to do it.
Yeah. I'll say this too, Jamie. You were talking about your family and stuff, because there is an entire subreddit on Reddit right now called Q Casualties, I think is the name. And it's literally just for family members and for friends of people who have gotten into QAnon and who are trying to cope with that and deal with that and talk with that. And that's another danger that we didn't even talk about earlier, is the interpersonal effects that this has. And I know somebody who a good friend of mine whose mom and sister has both gotten into QAnon and is trying to talk to her about it. And I'm trying to help her out too by saying okay, maybe you should ask her about this and that, because it's so frustrating and it's so sad to see people isolate themselves from everybody else and create this identity that just really harms us in the end and prevents us from having really good conversations about this. What have you done since then, Jamie? Since you kind of figured out this news, I'm curious. Have you continued to have conversations with them? Are you totally cut off, or what's the game plan there?
Look, it's an extremely long story, but the short story is I haven't spoken to him for about a year. He actually ended up in jail because he became a sovereign citizen, which I'm sure you know what that is.
Oh my God!
Yeah. We've talked about sovereign citizenry on this show.
Oh man, I could talk for hours, but
I'm in a state full of them. Just know that. So is he.
Yeah.
And also a thing which I don't know if you would have heard of, called being in the private. So being in the private is like a secret society where you sort of sit outside of the normal world, with all the elite people, and you don't have to follow the rules. So he ended up, he had a very wealthy girlfriend, and he ended up, the family wanted to disconnect from him because they saw him as a threat to their inheritance. So they talked their mother out of hanging out with him anymore. And he ended up getting a restraining order on him, which he broke multiple times, ended up in jail, and then sat in jail for a year because he was right. He wanted to be right about the fact that the law didn't apply to him. And eventually the government jumped through enough hoops to pin him down and get some meds into him, and he came to his senses long enough to get legal aid, got out of there, said there was nothing wrong with him. And, we absolutely lobbied him to stay on his meds because he was the brother of old. He was the Chris that I knew from 2006. And essentially, I was sitting there and I said, well, mate, you're either there's something wrong with you or you're a word starting with C, and, you're going to end up alienating your whole family. And he just went off his meds as soon as he could. And as far as and he lives out in a van out in
If I can say I mean, that's not a moral failing on this person's part, your brother. It's disappointing and it sounds heartbreaking, but it's not a moral failing on his part. Listen, if you have mental issues and you don't take medication, I know people who don't fucking believe in God or any of that shit or sovereign citizen that deal with that stuff. And so we have to be forgiving to that because there's mental health issues in that. But the other piece, even if Dan disagrees, I'm not trying to argue with him. There is something that is happening. I have paid attention. Listen, I have paid attention. I'm not saying I have fucking secret information. I got no secret information, but I've paid attention to right-wing movements since 1985 all across the world. I have fought against them. I've been an anti-fascist and Antifa since 1985 in different forms, inside the systems, outside the system. I've always fought against fascism. And one thing that has come up that is dragging people down further than ever is this right-wing media ecosystem that operates like a cult that tells you to not pay attention to the outside media and that everything that only takes place in that mirror of self-reflection is the truth and reality. And it's drawing people in, maybe, I can't say, but maybe like your brother who get affected by this. They are not, they're getting what Kellyanne Conway called an alternate facts. They're not just getting different interpretation in the news. It's a whole different news that tells them that the world that they're inhabiting is right. And people like fucking Alex Jones and Little Green Footballs and Daily Wire and all of these fucking places are responsible for it. I put it in because I live in Austin. I put it at the foot of Alex Jones for creating this. Yeah. For creating a lot of this. That motherfucker makes $25 million a year so that people like your brother end up suffering. And so he can fucking sell his supplements and fucking lie about everything and criminalize. 3 weeks ago on his radio show, he was calling for the murder of Antifa protesters in the streets. Murder of that. How does that fucking happen? That's not free speech. Fuck you, Alex Jones.
Yeah. And I agree with that stance there. Fuck Alex Jones. Not a good dude. It's all really bad. JB, we have to get to some other callers here, but I hope what we've said here is at least comforting to you in some way. I wish you well, and I hope when dealing with your brother that things work out for you. But thanks for calling the show and thanks for giving us your take on stuff. Really appreciate you calling in tonight.
Be well, man.
We have some other callers here, but it's stuck in my mind. Scott, what can you explain just very quickly to me? You said veganism inspired homophobia? What?
No. Vegans. No.
Oh, I must have missed that.
Back up.
What is it?
So, okay. The way radical ideas are is that people that think that they're radical about certain things are not radical about other things. They're very conservative, even though I don't like using those dichotomies about other things. So in the animal rights world, which I was part of for 30, almost 40 years, and almost gave my life for unwillingly and willingly, that many people were homophobic, transphobic, racist, sexist, across, because animal liberation, non-human animal liberation was the ideology that they supported, and the rest of it didn't matter. And I've heard all my fucking life, I've heard the Holocaust compared to the Holocaust of Jews after Nazi Germany to fucking factory farms, and I'm like, go fuck yourself. They're not the same. And I believe that non-human animals are sentient beings. It's not because I don't think that or I've changed my view on it. It's because you cannot compare the suffering. It's not fair.
Okay, that makes more sense. I didn't know you were saying a bunch of stuff there. I was like, wait, did I hear that right? So I'm glad you clarified for me that. Thanks. I was like, I gotta ask about that real quick because I did not see the connection.
It's a problem. I mean, if you look at I'm not even kicking you, man. Like this is I'm not. This is not against you or anybody. But dude, like the vegan world is largely fucking wealthy white people.
I 100% agree with that. 100% agree.
Yeah, and I'm not. This is not a critique just on that, but this critique can go across a lot of things, and that's just an example. So I just want to be clear about that. I'm not trying to kick
It is this idea of if you're white and you're wealthy, and it's like, what's a pet project I can pick up on the side because I have this free time and I can talk about these things, that other people who are less.
Well, maybe it really makes you move. Maybe, maybe it really does activate what I call your emergency heart, which is this beautiful thing that operates inside of us that drives us towards action. It makes us want to have passion about making the world better for people. I have no problems with that. And even like extremists have that. It's just gone awry.
Yeah.
So like, I definitely don't want to kick anybody for that. So if I sound negative about it, it's definitely not. It's not about that.
I see what you mean. Yeah, I think encompassing entirely what you're saying and having a nuanced conversation, which you don't see too often these days. Maybe we can get some full context. But yeah, I totally get you. We got like 2 other calls on the line here that I want to get to before the end of the show. We got about 25 more minutes here. You want to do about 2 more? Can you handle 2 more?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, cool.
No, this is fine. This is going great.
I want to talk to Tim calling in from Washington, calling about the Kenosha victim blaming. Tim, what's going on?
Oh, hey. I was on Facebook, and a friend of mine sent a message to me and said, "Oh, did you know that one of the victims was a pedophile and the other was a rapist, and the one that got hurt was a wife beater?" And I was like, what? So I went online, and it took me about 5 minutes to find something on each one of the victims that the bastard shot, and nothing about horrible past like that in their lives. They were all loved. They were all respected. They had loving relationships with their significant others, and it just pissed me off. It was yet another one of those victim shaming, victim blaming things that goes on, and then I see today that a church raised $95,000 for Kyle. Saying how wonderful he was and he's a hero, and it's like, oh, you're on the wrong side, dude.
Yeah, we had the same problem here in Austin. Like Scott's already smiling because he knows exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah,
it's sad. I mean, it's like what what happened in Austin and what happened in Kenosha. The 20 other cars that people have driven into people since Heather Heyer since 2017 and murdered her, and they've injured and murdered other people across the way. It's right-wing terrorism, not framed as such, but victim blaming is part of the whole thing. And again, I sound like I have a fucking agenda. I do not have an agenda, but the right-wing media ecosystem, because listen, you guys don't know me from anybody, but what I do is I work with an anarchist PR firm, and I have worked on media and worked about critical analysis of media since 1988 or 1990. I've written on it many times and stuff. And so what's happening again, the power and influence of this right-wing media ecosystem that tells people that if they do this, that they're doing God's work, or they're doing Trump's work, or I just said that guy's name. I can't believe it. Oh my God. Or anything like that, because they make people like us others. Listen, I'm going to tell you this directly and seriously. I do not want to be murdered by somebody who thinks that they're a warrior like that. And I am looking how to solve that problem without moving. How do we work on the right-wing media ecosystems, because they have created this whole alternate reality that's being amplified by the fucking shitbag who is a president of the United States?
Yeah,
like an unpresident. The TV president is actually amplifying conspiracy theories and hate and doublespeak at a level that I have never heard from governments in my whole life, and I pay attention.
Yeah, it's scary, and it's. Part of the problem is, of course, we talk about these algorithms and how they work, and they're privately owned algorithms. They're not democratically made algorithms, and even then, that'd be not the best solution either. But we have no idea exactly how these things work. That's the scariest thing. I've talked to people. Well, I haven't personally talked to people. Excuse me. I've read articles from people who have worked from Google and who have worked from Facebook and stuff, who, because I really wanted to understand how these things work. and they can only say so much because either one, they don't fully understand because they don't know all the ins and outs, but also they're legally obliged not to give away any of that kind of information. And that's what freaks me out the most, because when there's a problem, and this has already happened, this is why they've had to change stuff, especially with YouTube, right? It's gonna be too late by the time we see some of these things happening. It's already too late. They've updated it and tried to change things, and now you see in Twitter take down more accounts and stuff. But I can
promise you,
they've taken down accounts, but at like a year later after the damage has already been done. That's and even then, it's not everybody who you or I might have wanted to have taken down, right? So it's not great. It's not great. We don't live in a great place and time for news right now. That's for sure.
No, and it's
totally
scary
true
for me. I mean, I'm a 55-year-old white guy who happens to be gay and who happens to believe that Black Lives Matter. And I'm scared to death to go out and be a part of these protests because some white guy is going to come with an AR-15 or AR-14 or whatever they are, the automatic machine guns that are built for war, and shoot me. And, it scares me to death. I want to be out there on the front lines with Black Lives Matter, and I want to be out there on the front lines with all of this stuff. Hell, I'd even join some anarchy marches because, frankly, I'm so far left. I'm further left than Bernie. So,
good on you, man.
But I'm scared to
welcome. We will welcome you. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Tim, it freaks me out too. And oftentimes I'm not scared of the people around me. It's more so, I mean, I'll say this much. When I was at the Black Lives Matter stuff, I saw the police just spraying people for no good reason. and that was the first time I'd ever seen something like that. Again, growing up in Waco and stuff, we just didn't see stuff like that. The most I had interaction with the police was getting speeding tickets. Like that was it. And that's a result of
that's the beauty of insurrection and uprisings, because they bring people in because they're emergency hearts like you and then the person on the phone, Tim. You get and you get engaged. You're like, oh my God, I got to do something about this. So we all end up on the barricades doing stuff. I'm not worried about being murdered on the barricades as much. When I talk about being murdered, I'm talking about assassination. When I'm talking about journalists being assassinated, authors being assassinated for advocating ideas. And so for me, it's the king of Antifa. I'm not the king of Antifa. I have no I just talked about it because I'd done it for a long time and I wanted some understanding about it. And so in the mainstream, and so I get death threats from that. That is totally separate. You're much more likely safe in doing this. And the thing is, being at the barricades is not the only thing to do. Being at the vigils is not the only thing to do. Being in the streets is not the only thing to do. If you want to bring systemic racism down, work on the prison systems, work on the education systems, work on the health systems, work on the housing systems, work on all the systems that cause all these things to happen. And all you got to do is pick one piece of it. You don't have to, we all want to be at the barricades. Listen, I want to be at the barricades. I love being tear gassed. It's fun. I ain't going to lie. I've been tear gassed plenty of times. I have fucking thrown them back. It is fun. It's okay. But that's not the world. That's not the world I'm trying to create. That's only the moment at that time. And there's so much more that we desire, and we need to express that in liberatory ways that mean something to people.
Interesting. Well, Tim, thanks so much for calling. I'm going to have to let you go now because I want to make sure we got time for our next call here. But you're a great caller of this show, and I'm glad you called in tonight. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tim. Be safe.
Thank you, Dan.
So let's go ahead and because we got about 15 minutes here, and I want to go ahead and end the show on this call here. We're talking to Jason now, calling in from Pennsylvania. Jason, what's going on?
Hey, what's up? First of all, Scott, you have an awesome haircut. Not that anyone else does awesome out there, but I love the hair.
Thank you.
I'm a musician, out of work musician right now from Pennsylvania, and I am a former Jehovah's Witness. And so I survived that experience, and I think it has a lot of relevance to what's happening now, actually, with Trump. And I wanted to, if I could, talk about something I've been thinking about lately, about how I converted at 16 to be a Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah, explain that connection to me with your Jehovah's Witness experiences, and now I'd be curious to know what you mean by that.
Well, I mean, basically, I've seen the inside of how cults operate. The Jehovah's Witnesses are most definitely a cult. And, you know, for instance, when someone points out something wrong about the Jehovah's Witnesses, like there was a Dateline special about covering up child abuse, for instance. Not only did they tell us not to watch it, they essentially called it fake news. Anything that you could say against the Jehovah's Witness organization, they could turn around to actually show that it was true, or they would discredit it. And I was also participating in that. I had a position in the organization, a small one, but I actually perpetuated that stuff because I believed it.
Yeah.
So what I see now, and please cut me off if I become very verbose at times. I don't want to distract or whatever, so feel free to cut me off. But what I see right now is something very similar. I see fake news. I see when Trump does something wrong, it's actually right. Everything gets turned around. The way that I see the current state of affairs is that essentially, you know, around 30 or more % of the country is involved in a cult. And I know that sounds extreme.
No, man, I'm with you 100%, dude. I am 100% with you. Just know that you are not alone in that. It's not a big majority of people. It's just a small amount, but they vote a lot.
Yeah. And Jason, I'll say this.
I agree with you.
Yeah, you know, if you watch the show, you know I've had a couple of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses guests on this show. Like they'll say the same thing. Sure. They say it's a cult, you know, and they talk about the
no, not about Jehovah's Witness. That what's going on politically is exactly the same. And it's only a small percentage, 30% of the population. I'm not talking about Jehovah's Witness. I'm talking about what's happening politically.
Sure. But I'm just reifying what Jason is saying here about seeing those connections, because because as someone who used to be a Christian evangelist myself, I see how I was keeping up with the system that I didn't even realize the part I was playing in it, right? I didn't realize I was simultaneously contributing to the homophobia in this country. I was also contributing to just all the bad ideas that come with that colonialism at some part. Yeah. I went on a mission trip to a Native American reservation, and that's one of the most embarrassing things I think I've ever done in retrospect, because of just the implications of that, you know, dissecting what that even is. But I didn't think about it that way at the time. That wasn't like, I didn't actively think I was harming people. I really thought I was doing good. And I think you could probably speak to this too, Jason. I think the people who are on the inside, really, a lot of them do think that they're doing good. And that's what's hard when talking about this, right? Because if you think you're doing good and someone's trying to convince you you're not, like that's a tough conversation.
I would agree. I've been to Guyana, and I've also fixed roofs after hurricanes. I've done all this stuff that felt like it was good, but it was kind of exploitative, you know? There was, I mean, you didn't realize it at the time. And by the way, these Jehovah's Witnesses, a lot of these people are some of the sweetest, most wonderful people, just like anybody else. Unfortunately, they're sucked into this cult. Now, no doubt there are some people at the top that are culpable of really manipulating this, but they're some of them. They're some of the best people that I've known, and now they will never talk to me again because I'm an apostate for them. But if I could, there was a lot of emotional reasons as a kid why I ended up becoming part of it. But if I could just highlight one thing about something I was thinking about recently, about why I converted, why I started believing this truth in a sense. And part of it was because they were proving other people wrong. Okay, so for instance, nobody would believe that God's name was Jehovah. You could ask people, they'd be like, I mean, back then anyway, before the internet, they'd be like, no, that's not God's name. God's name is God or the Lord. And, you know, maybe a Jewish person wouldn't say what it is. I don't know. But then you would look at Psalms 83:18 in the King James, and you'd see the word Jehovah, and you'd be like, fuck, those people were wrong.
Yeah.
And then that hardens you, and it gets you into the religion. So that's one example. And that's obviously not a solid foundation on which to base your epistemology about something that is going to ruin your life for a while.
Absolutely. And the thing about with Jehovah's Witnesses in general is it's because it's so modern in the context of a lot of other religious traditions. You can really point to the specific ideas of how they're wrong with a lot more evidence and a lot more accuracy than you can when talking about things that are much older, where the sources are hard to find and harder to interpret and require experts and study and stuff. Like with Jehovah's Witnesses, if you're talking about like the dates where they predicted the end of the world, that happened like a couple times when they did that. It's like you can keep pointing to all that and like, but that's still not stopping people from believing this, and either because they don't know that or they have some sort of explanation to explain that away. And it's just like what Scott was saying, we're kind of in a post-truth world, although I think it's kind of always been that way, but it's more that way now. I think more that way now.
Well, the post-truth people, this is the difference, is the post-truth people and the people who have agendas, they're having outsized influence that they used to never have, not just because of a president, because of the platforms largely, because like really fuck it, let's call it Facebook and Google and fucking Twitter, those Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, those 4 major platforms have done a shitty job of trying to work with post-truth because they fucking make billions and billions of dollars off of it. It's not a conspiracy. It's not my opinion about it. That's what they do. That's the whole thing. If you look up a cooking recipe on Facebook, I can do it anytime. Next thing is like a vegetarian option. Next thing is a vegan option. Next thing is animal rights. Next thing is animal liberation. It goes down the thing. You can see the algorithms that are doing it, and they don't have any motivation to stop it. And it's not a conspiracy, and I'm not even trying to make them stop it. It's just fucked it all up. And like as far as like Jehovah's Witness is like shooting fish in a barrel as far as I'm concerned. And then I mentioned I'm a gun owner too. I'm not a liberal left guy. Like I don't have guns and stuff, but I also don't keep guns around me or on me. And I'm not going to fucking shoot people for private property. But if I come at it with an empathetic voice and an empathetic way, I just understand that people are trying to make sense of a complex world as best as they can. And there's some people who try to profit from that and do profit, like largely it's the platforms, but there's also people, influencers and priests and preachers and stuff who also and have vested dollar interest in that. But most people are just trying to understand themselves and the world around them. And largely religion has been the containers for that, and secular ideas, have been difficult because many of the, especially the late 20th century and early 21st century ideas have taken on complexity as part of the idea. And that fucking is hard for most people to do because they either got to work and go to school and take care of their families and do things. And so religion and fucking ideas like conspiracies are shortcuts to just get to that. So like, oh, I understand the world now. And you get to hold a special piece of information. You got a special badge that you get to wear, And so I can look at it cynically and be mad at those people and go like, fucking this and that or whatever. Not the people who are manipulating, but the people who just actually believe it. Or I can take an approach where I understand that is your truth and it's a harmful truth to you, but I'm going to let you go through it because that's all I can do.
Great insight there, Scott. It's sad because again, you have empathy, but you also realize the beliefs are harmful at the end of the day. So you can't, for me, it's like, I can't just sit around and not talk about that. I can't just sit around and just let that happen.
That's right.
Because that harms people and that's going to have an effect. So yeah, it's why I try to speak out about this stuff. That's why I have a show like this. So Jason, we're coming to the end of the show here, but thanks so much for calling in about your experiences and stuff. And thanks for watching Truth One.
You well, man.
Yeah, sounds great.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for what you're doing.
Thank you, sir. And we're up at the tail end here of Truth One, but don't go away just yet because I will be on the Discord for the after show, as always. So be sure to go to the Discord link. It's in the description of this show to come talk to me. But Scott, if people want to talk to you, or maybe not talk to you, because you got a lot of people that send you messages that you probably don't want to receive. But if people want to find your work and want to know what you're up to, where should they go?
Well, the easiest place is scottcrow.org. There's a lot of writings on there. There's links to books and stuff. And then I had started a record label last year, and it's called Emergency Hearts. And it's not just a record label; it's a media label. Eventually, there'll be a reassessment of and music and videos from Texas experimental artists and stuff from 1980 to 2000. So those are two places you can find me. You can also find me on all the corporate social media platforms that are, whatever they are. I'm not even going to promote them. Fuck them. So. And the thing is, listen, I want to be honest about this. The reason I'm not having this conversation because I'm trying to convince people. We said this earlier in the show. I have nothing to sell. I don't fucking believe I have the truth, or I'm a zealot about anything. I'm just somebody who's trying to get along, who's tried to build these ideas and trying to alleviate suffering. And I think that's an important distinction in all of this. I don't know if I'm right. And I've made mountains of mistakes along the way. And we're going to continue to make more. But what I want is for small groups of people to be able to work together to figure out their world on their own terms that don't involve government or corporate interactions all the time, because we are more than consumers, we're more than voters, we're more than activists. I mean, we're humans in a crazy complex world, just trying to figure all these things out in an alienated world that we didn't create. And that we might necessarily agree with, but let's just figure out how to get along in it, not to get along together. I'm not all hunky dory, kumbaya. Fuck that too. But where groups can work together to do this, because the disasters that are happening, and it's not just ecological disasters like hurricanes or fires, but the disasters mean economic, ecological, political, and war. We have overlapping disasters happening now, and that it's only going to get worse for some communities. And that, how do we want to deal with that? Listen, I often say that those kinds of disasters reveal the failures of governments and corporations and civil society all along the way. And so they also create chances for openings and opportunity for small neighborhoods and communities to rebuild their lives, possibly in a different way. Maybe it's going to work. Maybe it only works for a while, but they give a shot to try it, because they've been left for dead, basically. So let's take those opportunities and let's try not to go towards authoritarianism that is going to leave millions dead and millions suffering, and the care of the 1% is only going to get richer. And so what I'm proposing is, like, what if we looked at these other ideas and maybe want to engage in ways that don't involve stockpiling toilet paper and guns, but engage helping each other to feed ourselves, to take care of our things, to basically meet each other's needs together.
Well, Scott, thanks so much for being on Truth Wanted tonight. Really appreciate it. And if you at home would like to engage with other people's ideas in our community, there's a couple ways you can actually do that. You can follow me on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan. You can also email me. The show is truth@atheist-community.org. In case you're interested in talking to me or inquiries about the show, you can send those there. And we also have a Facebook fan group as well, where you can talk to folks, and it's run by fans for the fans. I got that cool promo up there tonight. Really, really cool. And yeah, that's about it. Oh, also, you can find this show on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcasts. Please like, subscribe, review. Helps the show out, helps us get awesome guests to talk about stuff that we normally don't talk about on here. And I'm really glad we got to have some conversations tonight, Scott. Thanks again so much for being on.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's been enjoyable.
Awesome. Well, folks, that about wraps it up for another episode of Truth Wanted. Remember to always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.